let me start off by saying this is a tier list for competitive play or for high level ranked play. This is not going to apply to your everyday casual any MMR game. This is mostly for very high end level play, but if you want to follow this tier list for casual play, it will still help you. Obviously, you'll know what to be practicing as you're improving, and not only that, but even for lower end play, the tier list is still relevant. It's just a matter of like you're gonna see a Skye in low level tier that does much better than she actually would do at a high tier. So this is for competitive play and for high level ranked play, but it still applies to casual games. It still applies to lower end and higher end casual games. It's just not as it doesn't apply as much there. So starting off with Androxus used to be, I say, a solid S tier general pick. You could pick him whenever. I'd say he's probably gone down to like an A tier at best, B plus. I would probably put him somewhere in between B plus and A tier because I don't think he's as good of a general pick as some of the A tier champions. Actually, honestly, he's probably closer to a B plus tier than he is to an A tier. So he is a good pick. Don't get me wrong, Androxus is really good, and you can go into a casual game and you can fuck shit up with Androxus. The issue that he has is that he doesn't have the range damage. That's why you didn't see him being picked at LAN that much. You didn't we don't play him much in scrims. Like, we don't play him much in tournament play. He is a good pick. It's just he really struggles in competitive play. He really struggles at that long range poke that's so important. So yes, Androxus is a good pick. Yes, Androxus can carry. Yes, Androxus can outshine any other damage dealer in many situations. But as I said, since this is for competitive play, for high-end play, it's very hard for him to actually get stuff done in comparison to a Lex, a Victor, a Bomb King, a Drogoz that all have this high damage, high poke, and can just sit back and play the game how it's supposed to be played at a high level. So Androxus, again, somewhere between B plus tier and A tier, but closer to B tier if anything, because he's not a good general pick. He's more of a situational pick when you need to get up on high grounds, when you need to push places that you can't with a character like Lex or Cassie. Then Androxus is good, but it becomes this situational pick, not just a general good pick. Barrack, I'd say Barrack stays in probably the same spot. He is still like the second best tank after Makoa. There's a bit more flexibility now between the tanks. I think Makoa, Barrack, and Fernando especially are all relatively balanced, Fernando being the weaker of those three, and then Ruckus falls somewhere behind. So Barrack is still in kind of the same spot where you want to get him pretty early. You want to make sure that you're locking him down and not giving him to your opponents, but at the same time you don't want to be prioritizing. You're not going to be first picking it. A lot of the time you're not even going to be second picking it. So Bomb King, I'd say Bomb King is still S tier, honestly. Even with the nerfs, he's gotten 2 nerfs in a row now, but he's still probably S tier just because of the way he can be played with Accelerant. He can still jump around, he can still get a good flank, and if you're a good Bomb King, you will excel with Bomb King, and he will do a lot in the game. That's kind of how it goes with S tier champions, is that if you can play it well, and if you can put out consistent damage, then it's going to be a high tier champion. And when a player is playing it well, then he is going to be putting out consistent damage, and he is going to be one of the strongest damage dealers in the game. So Bomb King is still a solid S tier. There's no reason for him to drop down right now, even though he was nerfed. If anything, other champions will be dropping down and going up a bit more. Buck, honestly, Buck's still probably A tier. He serves a similar role to Androxus, where they don't have any poke damage, and it's a lot about just having the mobility, being able to move around, a more situational pick. But I feel like right now, at least, Buck fits in a bit better than Androxus does, because one, he actually has more damage at like these mid-range poke fights. Buck can actually do pretty much the same damage, even a bit more, but he can also jump in, jump out, so he gets some more poke damage there. And he has his self-heal, so he has sustain, and he has more HP, so he can be this kind of brawly front line that you need sometimes. So even though they're on a very similar level, and Androxus is definitely going to be able to carry more in a casual game. Like, I can go into a casual with Androxus and I will stomp people, but I might not be able to do it with Buck. In competitive and high-end play, Buck's probably going to do better than Androxus just because of the survivability of being able to jump in and actually get that poke damage. Cassie, I think Cassie's still A tier as well. Like, there's no reason for her to go up right now. Sure, she was buffed. Like, she was buffed with her scout, so she gets some movement speed. She got 100 more HP. She's gotten her roll reduced by her roll cooldown reduced by 1 second, so she can roll more often. But even then, she still deserves this role. Like, you can pick her, but she's not that great. Like, I would have put her at B+ tier, potentially even B tier in OB47, just because like she's not played, she's not used very well. But with the buffs, I think she kind of like, she's going down, but she's going back up to A again. Like, you can definitely pick her. She's probably a solid last pick. Like, if you find a situation where she can be played well, then she's definitely a solid A tier. You can fit her into quite a few different comps. Drogoz, I think Drogoz is still A+ tier. I probably would have put him up to S tier if it weren't for the nerfs to Masterful that we just saw. He's been played a lot. We've seen him a lot in competitive play, and he's definitely a fantastic pick. But with the nerf to Masterful, that should actually hurt him quite a bit. Like, it's very detrimental, and you're probably going to see a lot of players playing without Masterful entirely. So because of that, I think even though he would normally go up, and I would say he's been played more, he's doing better than he was in OB46. Because of the nerf, I think he's going back down again, so he's kind of staying put at A+. Eevee, I'd say Eevee goes up to A tier. I think she can fill her role, a similar role to Buck, where she can be this brawly, frontline-y style. She can get a flank and she can get stuff going really easily. She's good for setting up plays, and I definitely think that Eevee can fill that role of, alright, we need a last pick carry, or we need a carry to fill this role, sort of, and you can definitely pick Eevee now. It's not like in OB46 where it's just like you could never play her at all, really, unless you had a very specific situation. So she fills that role of, alright, well, we need this last pick, we need this specific thing, you fit that role just fine, you go for it. Where you might take a Cassie, you might take a Buck, and sometimes you might take an Eevee instead, just depending on the situation. Fernando definitely moves up in my eyes. I wouldn't be confident putting him in A+ tier. I don't think he's that good, but he's definitely A tier. He's a solid pick. He's a good overall tank. Like, he is an option, right? That's the main thing, is that he is 100% an option. You can go Fernando in pretty much any game. It just comes down to, like, you're not going to first pick him. You're not going to probably pick him in the middle either. It's just going to be like a last pick. Like, okay, well, do we need another tank or do we need a carry? If you need a tank, you'll take the Fernando. If you need a carry, you'll take one of the Eevee, Buck, or Cassie or something like that. So it's definitely, like, Fernando's definitely a solid pick. He can be put into multiple comps. He works with pretty much anything. It's just that you're not picking him early. He's not a priority pick. He's not relevant in the rest of how you're drafting the rest of your comp. So it's a solid A tier. He fits in pretty much any comp right now. Grohk has some issues right now. We don't really know how Grohk is going to perform. Obviously, he's been nerfed now from his previous self, and he's more about the left click than he is about the right click now. He's going to be able to chase down people and to get more damage off with his left click, but he's also not going to be able to get as many bounces, and the bounces aren't as relevant. So I mean, this is kind of the Androxus Syndrome, where I'd put him between B+ and A probably, but I'm probably gonna put him B+ just because I don't see him being that solid, like, last pick option. He's not the Buck or Eevee or Fernando where you're picking him and you're putting him into any comp. I would be picking Grohk for very specific circumstances. Let's say they have a Ying and a Barrack, and I go, okay, well, we need a brawler, we need some sort of damage dealer here to deal with the Ying and Barrack. Then you pick the Grohk. You're not picking him just because, okay, we need a damage dealer, right? Like for Cassie or for Eevee, for Buck, you're going, we need a damage dealer, and you have these couple of options. These are your options. This is what your situation is. You pick one of these. That's not what Grohk is. Grohk is, we specifically need to pick Grohk because of this. It's never we need a general damage dealer, let's pick Grohk. It's we need to deal with this specific situation, we pick Grohk. So while he can serve the same purpose as Buck, Cassie, or Eevee, he doesn't serve as many purposes, right? He doesn't fit all those roles. He just fits very few. So I'd say Grohk is B tier or B plus tier along with Androxus, because they both have that syndrome sort of. Grover, while everybody likes Grover, unfortunately I'd probably say he's C tier, or B tier I mean. There's no real reason to pick him. He's a pocket strat at best. Like there's just no reason to pick him right now. It's sure he has his roots, sure he can get damage off, but you're only picking him with very specific strats, which is the same what we've discussed with Inara and Torvald in the past, where they do one thing. They can do that thing very well, but they do one thing, and you're only picking that with one comp. So I'd say Grover is just straight up B tier right now. Kinessa I'd say still B plus tier. She again would be on the line between B plus and A tier. I would say I'd be more happy to pick Kinessa in more scenarios than Grohk and Androxus, but because of her limitations on map and comp, it's hard to fit her into comps. She definitely fills the role better than a Grohk and Androxus. Like when you feel the need to pick a Kinessa, when you go, oh man, Kinessa's going to be really good here, she usually tends out to be very, very good. Whereas a Grohk and Androxus tend to just be like, they just fit the role. So even though Kinessa fits her own role better, it's still hard to fit her into comps just because she has so many limitations on both map and team comp. Like the second they have an Eevee or a Buck, it's just like, I don't really want to pick Kinessa into this, and it's hard to fit her in properly. It's hard to say, just generally speaking, we need a damage carry, let's pick Kinessa. Let me just move Androxus over here as well. Alright, the one you've all been waiting for, I guess, Lex. So obviously in OB47 we saw a lot of Lex already. Because I haven't done a tier list for OB47, I'm just going to skip the entire OB47 where he was potentially like S plus tier, picked in almost every game. I'd say now with the nerfs, with all the nerfs he's gotten over multiple patches, I'd say honestly he's probably A tier. Like it might come as a surprise, but like I wouldn't be comfortable saying that he's A plus tier. I wouldn't say that I want to prioritize him every time. I don't want Lex every time. Because honestly, Lex and Androxus or Lex and Grohk, they're kind of interchangeable. Like you can pick them, like you don't have to pick the Lex. You don't have to pick the Lex when you can pick an Andro. You don't have to pick Lex when you want a Eevee or Cassie. You can just go, alright, do we need a Lex here? Like that's the core of it. Do we need a Lex here? Is he good on this map? Is he good against this team comp? That's what you're looking for. You're not saying, let's get Lex because he's strong. You're saying, let's get Lex because, like, does he work here? Does he work in this situation? Which is how the A tier kind of works out, basically. It's, these are good options. What's the situation? What do we need here? It's not, let's pick Lex because he's good. It's, let's pick Lex because he fits into this situation. So I'd say he's A tier. Like, I can't see any reason for him to be A plus tier right now. Maeve, I think Maeve stays C tier. She's just, there's no reason to pick her over any of the other options. You could argue she could potentially fit into B tier where she'd be very good for pocket strats, but even then, I can't think of any specific pocket strat that relies on Maeve, you know? I can think of pocket strats that rely on Grover, that rely on Inara and Torvald. But Maeve doesn't, like, she's not a dependency for a pocket strat, you know? She's just there, she just exists, so still C tier, she's pretty much useless. Makoa, still S tier. He had a little nerf to his ultimate. The duration it takes, or the animation for popping your ultimate, the heal doesn't actually happen until you're finished with your animation, which is actually a pretty big deal. It's something that Makoa players have to get used to a little bit, and until they get used to it, it's a very big deal. Once they get used to it, it's just kind of it's there. You have to remember it's there, and it does actually hurt him. It does hinder him a lot. Because we've seen some recent resurgence in Makoa, especially with the half shell. I'd be almost willing to put him in S+ tier, but he's a bit limited right now. He only has one real playstyle, let's say, and that is with half shell. Playing Pluck Makoa isn't particularly viable. You can fit it in certain scenarios, but the issue he has is, again, he kind of has to play with half shell. In 90% of scenarios, you're gonna be playing with half shell, and that's kind of a hindrance to putting something at S+ tier. Is that if you can't play them in multiple ways, then there's no you can't argue that he can be S+ or even SS tier. You have to play him in one game. He's predictable, but the thing that he does so well. It's the same thing with Bomb King. Bomb King plays, well, honestly, Bomb King you could argue can play in multiple ways, but the one way you generally play him is just using, just abusing the fact that you have Accelerant, and he does that so well. And he gets behind, he gets in a position where he can really disorient and abuse the fact that the enemies can't keep track of him, and that's why he's so good. And the same thing with Makoa. He does his one thing and he does it so good. So that's what warrants the S tier pick, I'd say. Pip, honestly speaking, so this one might come as a bit of a surprise, but while I might have put him in A tier, because he kind of fills the same role as Lex, Buck, Cassie, where it's like, okay, we need a carry, we need to fill this slot, and here are a couple of options, which one fits best. I would honestly say that Pip is A+ tier. I think that he fills more roles, he fills so many different roles, he can fit into so many different comps that it warrants him being A+ tier. Because you can pick Pip anytime. The only time you cannot pick Pip is if you have too many blasters. If you already have a Bomb King, if you already have a Drogoz, if you already have an Eevee, then it's risky picking Pip because you risk them getting blast shields. If you don't have those though, or if you only have one, then I absolutely think that Pip is A+ tier. I think he can be really fucking good. Ruckus is gonna go down to B+ tier. He's still good, he still fits into comps, he still has potential, and he works, but he's so much more situational than the other tanks. The thing about Ruckus is that out of the tanks, he's the one that's good against other tanks. So they pick Makoa, they pick Berg, they pick Fernando. Ruckus is the one that's pretty damn good against those. The only one he's kind of against is Makoa, because Makoa has so many ways to deal with the Ruckus. But against the Barrack, against the Fernando, even against Torvald, even against Inara, he's really good against all of those. So he's kind of like the tank killer of tanks, which you might expect would put him higher. The issue he has is that he's not that good against other stuff. He's good against the tanks, but he doesn't fill the tank role as well as some of these others. He takes so much poke, he has so little survivability compared to the others, because he doesn't have any mobility really, and he's stuck being in the same location. He's stuck being in a situation where he's gonna take damage one way or another. Sure, he can take a lot of damage, he can tank a lot of damage with his shield, his damage reduction, but he's being forced to take a lot of damage. You're just standing there taking all of it, compared to a Fernando, a Barrack, a Makoa who can just avoid it entirely, you know? It's a big difference. While they might in the end have the same survivability, Ruckus is taking all the damage, and the second you get Cauterized and Wreckers online, he's just screwed. His survivability just tanks compared to some of the other tanks. Like a Barrack, a Cauterized isn't going to ruin a Barrack, but a Cauterized does ruin a Ruckus. So I'd say he's B+ tier. He definitely fits into some comps. If you see that they're running multiple tanks, you can fit him in one way or another. Or if you just see a general composition that he works well against, then he can definitely be picked and he can excel in that role. But you can't just blind pick him. You can't just be like, okay, we need a tank, let's pick Ruckus, or we need a tank, or a solo tank, let's put him in. You know, that's not what Ruckus is for. He's very specific. You pick him for very specific reasons. Shaolin, I'd say Shaolin is about online with A+ still. I wouldn't put him as high as Drogoz, even though he is definitely played pretty much every single game. I wouldn't really put him on S tier. If anything, he might be somewhere between A+ and S tier. But for now, we'll keep him A+ tier. He fills his role well. He wasn't really nerfed. Like, they did nerf his planted a little bit, but it wasn't too bad. The issue with Shaolin is that he does a lot of damage, and he gets a lot of kills. Well, actually, he doesn't even get that many kills. He gets kills with his planted, but he's always there. He's always doing damage. He's just like, it's not reliable, confirmable damage, you know? Like, even compared to a Cassie, right? A Cassie standing back and sniping and poking like a Shaolin might do can still hit more shots and can still end up doing more damage. But that's not relevant to the game right now. It's not like all that damage that a Shaolin can do is just gonna get healed up, right? He's good because he can kill tanks. He's good because he can get picks on flankers. He can stun them and use his planted and get a quick kill. He's not good because he just stands there and throws arrows out, you know? Like, all that damage just gets healed up in the current meta. There's so many really strong healers that just heal all the poke you do, and he ends up just getting negated. So putting him in S+ tier would be a bit too much. He still is really good, and it's still very important because he can get those picks. And in the game right now, getting those little picks that turn a team fight that's super important. Like, just one kill can snowball you the game. So it is important to have CC like Shaolin does and quick pick potential like Shaolin does. But he's not quite S tier like Bomb King or Mako, I'd say. Skye, I mean, Skye's still C tier. What do you know? Maybe she'd warrant a B tier because she could be a pocket strat, but I feel like Torvald, Inara, and Grover all fit into more pocket strats. Like, Skye has a pocket strat, and it's a predictable pocket strat. It's a pocket strat that nobody really cares about because it does one thing, whereas, like, I don't know, it's hard to give her anything but a C tier. She's just bad, you know? SNEK, I would say SNEK is A+ tier. I think SNEK and Ying are still both A+ tier. They are pretty high up on the pick priority. You're always gonna have one of the two pretty much, unless you're doing some janky pocket strat like Mega Heal Pip or Grover or something like that. You're always gonna have one of them. I'd say for both SNEK and Ying, they keep their spot in A+. They do their thing so well. You can't put them in A+ or in A tier because they're not situational picks. You're always gonna have them, and when you do have them, they will 100% like fulfill their role. Torvald, again, I'd say same spot. I think Torvald is a perfectly fine B tier. Both Torvald and Inara are perfectly fine in B tier. They are super situational picks that work okay in those situations. I'd argue maybe Torvald is B to B+. Honestly, maybe even Inara is B to B+, but I'm just going to put them both in B tier because they fill that. Like, in my mind, B tier means they are going to fill a certain role for a certain strat, and if they can fill that role for that certain strat, they will do well. And both Inara and Torvald are that. They are pocket strategy picks that work well when you pull it off well. Like, when you execute the pocket strat well, then it works very well with both Torvald and Inara. And same thing with Grover. So I'd say they're solid B tier. You could argue that maybe they would go up to B+, but I wouldn't say that they're as good as any of the characters in B+ right now. Tyra probably drops down to B+ tier. She's more the same situation as the champions in B+ tier, where she fills a very certain role. If you see a situation where she can do well in, then she can do well in that situation, but you can't just generally pick her. You can't just say, alright, let's grab a Tyra, it'll work great here. You can't go, we need a carry, who's it going to be? It's going to be Tyra. It's more of a, we need a carry here for this specific situation, let's pick the Tyra. So that's the distinguishing factor between A and B+, is you're either picking a carry you're just picking a damage dealer to fill that last damage dealer role, or in B+ tier, it's we're picking a damage dealer, we need this specific type of damage dealer. This is the one good situation where we really need this damage dealer, you know? So I'd say Tyre is a solid B+ tier. Inara we already went over. I guess last up is Victor. Victor, honestly, I really want to put Victor at A+ tier because I think he is a good general pick. He's definitely like leaning towards A+ tier, but I don't really want to put him there yet because there are situations where he gets dicked on, and I wouldn't be comfortable just saying, alright, we're like, they had their first pick, we had our second pick, and they're like in the middle of the draft somewhere, you're like third or fourth pick. You could potentially pick Victor, but in every situation I wouldn't. Like, I wouldn't go, alright, what's our next general damage dealer pick? I would go, alright, it's Drogoz or Shaolin. I wouldn't go, alright, it's Victor. Victor's more closer to a last pick style carry. He fits into certain comps just like an Eevee or a Lex does. So I wouldn't be comfortable picking Victor every single game in that middle spot, but he does definitely do well. He's very close to being A tier, but just not quite there yet because he does have comps where he doesn't excel, I'd say. Unlike, say, Drogoz and Shaolin, who pretty much always can do something in every single comp. But if just like the slightest buff or the slightest meta shift, I definitely think Victor's going to be A+ tier, potentially even higher. So yeah, that's it for this tier list. Again, I want to reiterate the fact that this is for competitive and high tier play. This is not for casual play, but some of it, a lot of it even, does apply to casual play. But don't take anything 100% to word for casual play. Like, obviously Androxus is going to do very well in a casual game. Obviously Grohk can also do very well in a casual game. Obviously you can pick Inara or Torvald and still do just fine. But this is specifically for competitive play. This is how, when I go into my draft for my team, this is how I think.